My son forgot to hang up after calling me. That's when I overheard him laughing with my daughter-in-law as she said the words that would change everything. She believes you. The meds are working. Soon she won't even remember her own name. What I did next would expose their entire scheme and turn their lives upside down. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. My name is Margaret Harrison, but everyone calls me Maggie. At 62, I'd built a multi-million-dollar interior design empire from scratch, climbing my way up from a childhood spent wearing hand-me-downs and eating generic cereal. Now sitting in my Westchester County mansion, I was starting to feel my age creeping up on me like an unwelcome house guest. You know those little moments that make you wonder if you're losing it? Misplaced reading glasses that turn up in the refrigerator, forgotten appointments that leave you standing confused in parking lots, that smartphone that might as well be written in ancient Greek by aliens who hate elderly people. Add arthritis medication and blood pressure pills to the mix, and suddenly you're that woman fumbling with pill bottles like they're Rubik's Cubes designed by sadists. The worst part? I'd always prided myself on being sharp as a tack. I could remember every client's favorite color scheme, every contractor's phone number, every supplier's delivery schedule. My mind was my most valuable asset. That's when David reappeared in my life, like a bad penny. My son hadn't spoken to me properly in 15 years. Not since the divorce that made the War of the Roses look like a friendly disagreement over dinner plans. He'd chosen his father Robert's side with the enthusiasm of a sports fan, picking a winning team naturally. Nothing says happy family like your own child calling you a selfish witch in a courthouse hallway while reporters scribbled notes. The custody battle had been brutal, even though David was already 18 and legally able to choose where he wanted to live. But choose he did, and it wasn't with me. Robert had poisoned him against me so thoroughly that David blamed me for everything from the divorce to global warming. When Robert died suddenly 10 months ago from a heart attack that surprised everyone, I thought maybe, just maybe, David might reach out. You know, grief has a way of putting things in perspective. He didn't come to the funeral, didn't call, didn't even send one of those generic sympathy cards you buy in hospital gift shops. Class act, my son. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd married Amanda a few years back, some blonde who worked in healthcare. Beyond that, radio silence for over a decade. But 2 months ago, miracle of miracles, David showed up at my door with his wife Amanda, like some twisted version of the prodigal son story. "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said, looking like butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. "We've wasted too much time holding grudges." Amanda nodded sympathetically beside him. Blonde, pretty, early 30s, worked as a medical assistant. The kind of woman who probably calls elderly patients sweetie while checking their pulses and mentally calculating their net worth. "Life's too short to stay angry," she added with the practiced sincerity of someone who's rehearsed this speech in front of a mirror until it sounded natural. Here's the thing about desperate, lonely people. We don't ask the smart questions. Questions like, "Why now?" or "What do you want?" or "Where the hell have you been for the past decade and a half?" We just open our arms and hope for the best, like idiots buying lottery tickets with our last $5. I should have slammed that door faster than a tax audit notice. But first, let me tell you about my paranoid old lady insurance policy. Years ago, after my divorce turned my life into a demolition derby, I'd hidden a prepaid phone in my bedroom. One of those cheap flip phones that can't be traced to anything. Call it paranoia or call it preparation, but growing up poor teaches you to always have an escape plan ready. Little did I know how much I'd need it. Amanda wasted no time inserting herself into my daily routine like a splinter you can't quite dig out. "Maggie, I've noticed you seem a bit scattered with your medications," she said one afternoon, eyeing my collection of prescription bottles like a hawk studying field mice. And okay, fair point. I had been mixing up my morning and evening pills occasionally. Sue me, when you hit 60, pills multiply like rabbits, and every bottle looks identical when you're squinting without your reading glasses. Amanda gathered all my medication with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before and returned with what looked like a pharmacy's worth of organization. Professional pill organizer, color-coded schedule, laminated charts, and some new additions I didn't recognize. "These are cognitive support supplements," she explained, showing me blue capsules that could have been anything from vitamins to horse tranquilizers. Dr. Martinez at our clinic recommends them for anyone over 60. They'll help with the memory lapses and confusion. The supplements made me drowsier than a Sunday sermon in July, but Amanda assured me this was perfectly normal. Your brain is getting better nutrition. Some fatigue is expected while your system adjusts to the improved chemical balance. Right, because nothing says brain nutrition like feeling like you've been hit by a sleep dart shot from a blowgun. Meanwhile, David appointed himself my personal financial advisor with the enthusiasm of a kid let loose in a candy store. "Mom, some of these investments are pretty aggressive for someone your age," he said, reviewing my portfolio like he was reading a treasure map. "Maybe it's time to be more conservative with your approach. You know what's funny about adult children who suddenly care about your money? They always think you should be more conservative." Translation: Please make your assets easier to access when we inevitably inherit them, preferably sooner rather than later. When David suggested bringing in a specialist in senior financial planning, I agreed faster than you can say inheritance tax. Because clearly, the woman who built a business empire from nothing needed a 20-something to explain money to her. My assistant Sarah, who'd been with me for 12 years and knew my business better than I knew my own shoe size, suddenly became overwhelmed by complexity. David diplomatically suggested we streamline operations to reduce her stress. By the end of the month, David made another suggestion that should have sent up more red flags than a communist parade. "Mom, we're spending so much time driving back and forth to help you. What if we stayed in the guest wing temporarily, just until we get your health situation stabilized?" I was so grateful for their concern that I practically begged them to move in. Because nothing says healthy family dynamic like your estranged son suddenly wanting to live with you right when you start showing signs of confusion. One by one, everyone I trusted was being replaced by people I didn't know. But hey, at least I had my loving family living with me now, right? If this sounds familiar, congratulations. You've spotted the setup for every con game ever invented. 2 months into their loving return to my life, my brain started feeling like it was wrapped in cotton candy that had been left out in the rain. I'd begin sentences and forget the endings like I was reading from a script with half the pages missing. Simple tasks like balancing my checkbook became rocket science. Some mornings I'd wake up genuinely unsure what planet I was on, let alone what day of the week. "I think we should get you evaluated," David said with Oscar-worthy concern, his brow furrowed like a method actor preparing for his big scene. "These episodes are getting worse, and we're worried about your safety." Amanda had been keeping detailed notes about my cognitive lapses, and let me tell you, nothing makes you feel more loved than someone documenting your every mental stumble like you're a lab rat in a maze experiment. She arranged an appointment with Dr. Miller, a geriatric specialist who came highly recommended. Apparently, my family physician, Dr. Peterson, was too old-fashioned for modern dementia treatment, because nothing says cutting-edge medicine like replacing a doctor who's known you for 20 years with someone who's never seen you before and doesn't know your medical history from a grocery list. Dr. Miller's examination was thorough, I'll give him that. After reviewing Amanda's detailed notes and putting me through cognitive tests that made me feel like I was failing kindergarten all over again, he delivered the news that every aging person dreads hearing. "Mrs. Harrison, you're showing signs of mild cognitive impairment that could progress to dementia. The symptoms you're experiencing are consistent with early-stage decline, dementia." The word hit me like a brick to the face thrown by someone I trusted. The same disease that had slowly erased my mother's brilliant mind, turning her from a sharp-tongued woman who could calculate tips in her head to someone who forgot her own daughter's name. Dr. Miller prescribed medication to slow the progression and recommended lifestyle changes. Amanda, with her medical background, volunteered to monitor everything because, hey, why wouldn't you trust someone you barely know to control mind-altering substances? With David and Amanda now living in my guest wing temporarily, they had constant access to oversee my medication schedule and daily routine. They coordinated with Dr. Miller to adjust my dosages whenever I complained about side effects. "The drowsiness means it's working," Amanda explained, with the patience of someone talking to a very slow child. "Your brain is getting the chemical support it needs." But here's what really bothered me. And this is where my suspicious old lady brain started working overtime despite the pharmaceutical fog. The timing was awfully convenient, wasn't it? David shows up after 15 years of radio silence, and suddenly I'm losing my marbles faster than a kid with butterfingers at a marble convention? Call me paranoid, but I've built a successful business by paying attention to patterns. And this pattern smelled fishier than a seafood market during a power outage in August. Time to conduct some experiments on myself before I lost the ability to think clearly enough to save my own life. Here's what they don't tell you about fighting back when someone's drugging you. It requires the acting skills of an Oscar winner and the sneakiness of a cat burglar on a midnight heist. I started conducting experiments on myself that would have made Dr. Jekyll proud. Some mornings, I'd pretend to take my pills, but slip them into tissues instead, flushing them down the toilet when no one was looking. Not easy when you're being watched like a prisoner on suicide watch, but desperation makes you creative in ways you never imagined. On the days I skipped doses, the fog lifted just enough for me to think clearly. And let me tell you, clarity is terrifying when you realize you've been played like a violin by your own family, and they're not even good at playing violin. After a week of secretly skipping half my medication, I caught them red-handed in the most devastating way possible. David had called me while he and Amanda were out handling some business errands. It was one of his new checking in on mom routines, the kind of concerned son performance that would have won him an Emmy if stupidity was a category. When our conversation ended, I thought he'd hung up, but apparently my brilliant son had forgotten to actually disconnect the call before immediately talking to Amanda. That's when I heard him talking to her, his voice casual and unguarded because he thought I couldn't hear him anymore. "She's completely bought the dementia story," he said, and my blood turned to ice water in my veins. Amanda's voice came through my phone clearly. She was obviously with him wherever they were. "The meds are working perfectly. Dr. Miller says we can increase the dosage next month. Soon she won't even remember her own name." Well, wasn't that just precious? My own son and daughter-in-law discussing my chemical lobotomy like they were planning a vacation to Disney World. "How much longer do you think?" David asked, and I could practically hear him rubbing his greedy little hands together like a cartoon villain. 3 months, maybe 4. Then we can have her declared incompetent and transfer everything. The facility is ready to take her after the holidays. And the business restructuring? Almost complete. She's signed everything, thinking it was routine paperwork. The holding company will take control once she's committed. David laughed, actually laughed, at their brilliant scheme. 2.7 million in liquid assets, plus the house and business equity. My gambling debts will finally be history. Gambling debts. Of course. My prodigal son hadn't returned out of love. He'd returned because loan sharks were circling like vultures, and Mommy had a nice, fat bank account just begging to be drained. They continued discussing logistics like they were planning a dinner party instead of destroying a human being. Liquidating my investments, selling my house, paying off David's creditors who'd apparently been threatening him for months. Every word was like a slap in the face. But you know what? Sometimes a good slap is exactly what you need to wake up from a nightmare. These people had seriously underestimated Maggie Harrison. Big mistake. Time to show them what this confused old woman was really capable of when she set her mind to it. Planning a counterattack while pretending to be mentally incompetent is like trying to solve calculus while riding a unicycle in a hurricane. Challenging, but not impossible if you're motivated enough and angry enough to fuel a small rocket. And honey, I was both motivated and furious. The next few days were crucial. I needed evidence, but I had to be careful not to let them know I'd overheard their conversation. One slip-up, and they might accelerate their timeline or do something even more drastic. During one of the rare moments when David and Amanda were both out running errands, probably meeting with their crooked lawyer or bribing more medical professionals, I searched through David's makeshift office setup in the guest wing. What I found made my blood boil like a tea kettle on high heat. Legal documents transferring power of attorney, business restructuring papers that I apparently had signed, and most chilling of all, research printouts about accelerated cognitive decline in elderly patients, and legal requirements for involuntary commitment. They'd been planning this methodically for months, maybe even before Robert died. Every detail was carefully calculated, from the timing of their reconciliation to the choice of medical professionals who would support their narrative. I photographed everything with my hidden prepaid phone, storing the evidence in multiple locations they'd never think to check. Inside old books, taped under furniture drawers, even buried in my jewelry box. But I needed help, and everyone I trusted had been systematically removed from my life like pieces on a chessboard. David and Amanda had replaced my financial advisor with someone more suitable for seniors, my assistant with temporary help that reported to David, even my family doctor with their hand-picked specialist. That's when I remembered my emergency resources, the paranoid preparations I'd made years ago that suddenly seemed less paranoid and more prophetic. Years earlier, during my nuclear divorce from Robert, I'd prepared for future emergencies like a doomsday prepper planning for the apocalypse. Safety deposit box at a different bank under my maiden name, containing cash and contact information for Marcus Chen, the private investigator who'd helped me document Robert's affairs during those dark times. Getting to the bank required a performance worthy of Broadway's finest theater. I waited until David and Amanda went on their weekly grocery shopping trip, one of the few times they left me completely alone since moving into my guest wing, like parasites, setting up permanent residence. I called a taxi from my hidden prepaid phone, the one I'd bought years ago, and kept charged in my bedroom drawer like a technological security blanket. At the bank, I retrieved my emergency stash, $5,000 in cash and Marcus's business card, slightly yellowed with age, but still perfectly legible. The teller looked concerned about my slightly disheveled appearance, but hey, that's what happens when you're fighting a pharmaceutical war against your own family. Marcus was now in his 70s, but still sharp as a tack and twice as clever. When I called him from a payphone, yes, they still exist in some corners of civilization, his reaction told me everything I needed to know. Maggie Harrison? 15 years. And you only call when you're in trouble. What's the story this time? I explained my situation to Marcus as clearly as possible, considering half my brain was still swimming in whatever cocktail of chemicals Amanda had been feeding me like a bartender with malicious intent. Elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, Marcus said after a pause that seemed to last forever. This is serious criminal territory, Maggie, but we need to be very careful. If they realize you're onto them, they might panic and do something dangerous. More dangerous than turning me into a drooling zombie? Trust me, you don't want to find out. This is going to take time to build a case properly. At least 6 weeks to gather enough evidence that will hold up in court. When I returned home, David and Amanda were waiting like worried parents whose teenager had missed curfew and probably crashed the family car. "Mom, where were you?" David demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We've been frantic. We called everyone we could think of." I channeled my inner confused old lady and let my face crumble like a poorly constructed sandcastle. I thought I was going to see Sarah at the office, but I got lost. Nothing looked familiar, and I couldn't remember how to get there. The relief on their faces was almost comical, like they'd just learned their lottery ticket was a winner instead of worthless paper. Their helpless victim was still under control, still perfectly manageable. "Oh, sweetie," Amanda cooed with fake sympathy. "You can't go out alone anymore. It's not safe for someone in your condition." That night, they added another pill to my regimen, probably to prevent more dangerous solo adventures. I palmed it like a magician performing for an audience of fools, but the game was getting riskier with each passing day. Over the next month, Marcus worked methodically, building our case piece by piece, like a master craftsman constructing something beautiful and deadly. What he uncovered made my blood run colder than a walk-in freezer. The pills I'd been taking contained mild sedatives and memory-affecting drugs that caused temporary confusion. Not enough to kill me outright, but enough to make me seem mentally impaired to casual observers and medical professionals who weren't looking too closely. Amanda's medical credentials were more fraudulent than a $3 bill. She'd worked as a medical assistant until losing her position 3 years earlier for irregularities in patient care. Translation: she'd been caught stealing drugs. She'd been using outdated credentials and fake references ever since, moving from job to job like a medical gypsy. David's financial situation made my divorce settlement look like pocket change found in couch cushions. He owed nearly $3 million to creditors who weren't the send a strongly worded letter type. These were people who would break kneecaps first and ask questions later. "There's more," Marcus told me during one of our secret phone calls. "I found records of a similar case in Phoenix 2 years ago. Elderly woman, mysterious decline, assets transferred to family, convenient death in a care facility before anyone could investigate." Amanda and David? I can't prove it definitively yet, but the method is identical down to the smallest details. We're not just dealing with thieves, we're dealing with people who've potentially done this before and gotten away with murder. The thought chilled me to the bone, but it also strengthened my resolve. Marcus needed more time to coordinate with federal authorities, but David and Amanda were getting impatient, like kids waiting for Christmas morning to arrive. "They're accelerating their timeline," Marcus warned me during another clandestine phone call. "My contact at the FBI says they need another 2 weeks minimum to set up proper surveillance and coordinate with local law enforcement. What if they try to commit me before then? Then we improvise and hope for the best. But Maggie, if they panic and try to move you immediately, you need to be ready to stall them any way you can." The crisis came exactly 2 weeks later, just as Marcus had predicted, with the accuracy of a meteorologist forecasting a hurricane. David announced they'd found the perfect solution for my care needs with the enthusiasm of someone who just solved world hunger. Serenity Gardens has an immediate opening, he said, showing me brochures that made the place look like a resort where celebrities go to recover from nervous breakdowns. They specialize in progressive memory care with cutting-edge treatment methods. Marcus had already investigated Serenity Gardens during his background research. Resort was accurate if you enjoy being heavily medicated in a locked facility with minimal oversight and staff who view patients as inconvenient obstacles to their paychecks. I don't want to leave my house, I said weakly, playing my role to perfection. This is my home. I built my life here. Mom, you need professional care now, David replied with fake patience that was thinner than tissue paper. We'll visit every day and make sure you're comfortable. Sure they would. Right after they finished spending my money on tropical beaches in Florida. But then something unexpected happened that nearly derailed our entire operation. 2 days before my scheduled admission, Amanda received a phone call in the guest wing that sent her into full panic mode, like someone had just told her the IRS was auditing her tax returns for the past decade. I was pretending to doze in the living room when she answered, and even from down the hallway, her voice carried as it went from sweet to venomous in record time. What do you mean someone's been asking questions? Who's asking questions? There was a long pause filled with the kind of silence that makes your stomach drop through the floor. If someone's investigating, we need to move now. Today, this whole thing falls apart if anyone starts digging into our background. David tried to calm her down, but I could hear the fear creeping into his voice, like water through a cracked foundation. Who would investigate? She doesn't have anyone left who cares about her. I'm telling you, something's wrong. We get her committed today, or we risk losing everything we've worked for. My heart started racing as I realized they were about to accelerate their timeline in ways that Marcus might not be prepared for. I used my hidden phone to send Marcus a text message, moving today. His response came back immediately. Stall. Need 4 hours minimum. 4 hours. I had to keep them from moving me for 4 hours while pretending to be a confused old woman. Time to give the performance of my life. Amanda's panicked phone call to Serenity Gardens was a masterclass in manufactured crisis, the kind of performance that would have impressed Broadway directors if they were in the market for sociopathic talent. Within an hour, they had an emergency bed ready for their latest victim, complete with expedited paperwork and a staff member who asked fewer questions than a blind customs agent. Mom, we need to take you to the hospital, David told me, his voice tight with barely controlled desperation. You had a severe episode this morning. You don't remember, but it was very concerning. I hadn't had any episode unless you count the episode of realizing my son was a complete sociopath, but I played along like I was auditioning for a soap opera about elderly abuse. But I needed to buy time, and confused old ladies are notoriously difficult to move when they don't want to cooperate. I feel fine, I said, trying to look confused but resistant. Why do we have to go right now? Can't we wait until tomorrow? I haven't even packed properly. No, Mom, Amanda said sharply, then caught herself and softened her tone like she was adjusting the volume on a radio. The doctors are waiting for us specifically. We can't delay your treatment. I sat down heavily in my favorite chair and refused to move, making myself into the human equivalent of a stubborn mule. I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening. Why can't I see Dr. Peterson first? For 30 precious minutes, I played the confused, frightened old woman who wouldn't cooperate with their urgent timeline. David and Amanda grew increasingly agitated, checking their phones constantly like teenagers waiting for text messages from their crushes. I want to call my lawyer, I announced suddenly, reaching for the phone. Mom, you don't have a lawyer anymore. Remember? David said quickly. We simplified your legal affairs last month. Had they? The fog in my brain made it impossible to remember signing those papers, but apparently I had agreed to a lot of things I couldn't recall. Finally, David lost his patience completely. Mom, we're going. Now, stop being difficult and get in the car. He physically tried to lift me from my chair, but I made myself dead weight like a sack of particularly stubborn potatoes. I want to call Dr. Peterson first. Why can't I see my own doctor who knows my medical history? Dr. Peterson doesn't understand your condition, Amanda snapped, her mask slipping completely to reveal the calculating predator underneath. He's too old to keep up with modern dementia treatment. As they finally managed to get me into David's car through a combination of physical force and emotional manipulation, I caught him on the phone with someone. "The package is proving difficult to move," he said quietly. "Yes, we're still coming. We're just later than planned. She's being more resistant than usual." Package. That's what I'd become to them. A problem to be shipped off and forgotten, like returning a defective appliance to the store. The drive to Serenity Gardens felt like riding to my own execution in a vehicle driven by the people who were supposed to love and protect me. At Serenity Gardens, Mrs. Walsh greeted us with professional sympathy, but I could tell she was uncomfortable with the rushed nature of everything happening around her. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm sorry about the emergency circumstances," she said, glancing between David and Amanda with barely concealed suspicion. "But we'll take excellent care of you." As she prepared the standard sedative for new patients, a cocktail designed to make difficult people docile, David couldn't resist micromanaging the situation, which turned out to be the fatal error that would destroy them both. "Make sure she gets the full dose," he told Mrs. Walsh with the authority of someone who thought he was in complete control. "She's been agitated and combative today." Mrs. Walsh paused, clearly troubled by his presumptuous attitude. "Sir, our standard protocol doesn't typically—" "Just do what you're paid to do," Amanda interrupted harshly, her professional facade cracking like cheap makeup under hot lights. That's when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Cars pulling up outside with the distinctive sound of people who meant business. I straightened up and spoke clearly for the first time in months, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife through butter. "Actually, I think there's been a mistake." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the next county over. David's face went white as a sheet. Amanda's mouth fell open like a broken hinge. Mrs. Walsh stepped back, finally realizing something was seriously wrong with this entire situation. "What did you say?" David whispered. I smiled. Not the vague, confused smile I'd been wearing for months, but a sharp, predatory grin that could have cut glass. "I said there's been a mistake. A very big mistake." That's when Marcus walked through the door with federal agents, looking like the cavalry arriving just in time in an old Western movie. "Federal agents," Marcus announced with the authority of someone who'd been planning this moment for weeks. Everyone stepped back from Mrs. Harrison. David and Amanda weren't going down without a fight, even though their fight was more pathetic than a wet cat trying to look intimidating. "She's mentally incompetent," David insisted, as handcuffs clicked around his wrists with the finality of a closing door. "We have legal documentation. She can't make decisions for herself." Amanda produced a folder of documents I'd never seen before. Forged power of attorney papers, medical guardianship forms, psychiatric evaluations declaring me unfit to manage my own affairs. For a terrifying moment, I thought their backup plan might actually work. The agents looked uncertain, radioing supervisors about the legal complexities of the situation. That's when Marcus played our trump card with the timing of a master poker player. "Agents, I think you need to hear this," he said, pulling out a recording device that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. As David and Amanda's own voices filled the room, discussing how they'd dope me until I couldn't remember my own name and liquidate my assets, their carefully constructed legal defense crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. The look on their faces was absolutely priceless. Pure, undiluted panic mixed with the dawning realization that they'd been outsmarted by the woman they thought they'd destroyed. "You recorded us?" David sputtered like a broken engine. "Sweetie," I said, borrowing Amanda's condescending tone, "you should never underestimate a confused old woman. We're full of surprises." What happened next was beautiful chaos, the kind of poetic justice that makes you believe the universe occasionally gets things right. Mrs. Walsh immediately set down the syringe and stepped away, finally understanding that she'd been about to participate in something very illegal and very wrong. David and Amanda went into full meltdown mode, like children caught stealing cookies from the jar. Amanda lunged for the sedative, while David tried to physically restrain me one last time. "She's having a psychotic break," Amanda screamed, with the desperation of someone watching their carefully constructed world collapse. "She needs immediate medication." But Mrs. Walsh was already backing away and reaching for her phone. "I'm calling security and our medical director immediately." As federal agents took control of the situation, David and Amanda's true nature emerged like cockroaches when the lights come on. "She's mentally incompetent," David insisted, even as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. We have legal documentation proving she can't make decisions for herself. This is all a misunderstanding, Amanda added, trying one last desperate lie. We're her family. We love her. The agents weren't buying any of it, especially after Marcus played the recording of their conversation planning my destruction. As David and Amanda's own voices filled the room, discussing dosages and timelines and asset transfers, their carefully constructed legal defense crumbled like week-old bread. But Amanda managed one final threat as they were led away, her mask of concerned daughter-in-law finally discarded completely. "This isn't over," she hissed with genuine venom. "David's creditors will come for you next. You haven't won anything. You've just delayed the inevitable." She was right about one thing. Winning this battle didn't mean the war was over. David's gambling debts wouldn't disappear just because he was going to prison. But for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Clear-headed, sharp-tongued, and completely in control of my own mind. And Maggie Harrison had never backed down from a fight in her life. The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. David received 15 years for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Amanda got 12 years for conspiracy and practicing medicine with fraudulent credentials. Dr. Miller lost his license and received 3 years for his role in the scheme. Mrs. Walsh was cleared of charges but lost her job for failing to recognize obvious signs of abuse. The investigation revealed that Amanda and David had targeted at least 3 other elderly victims over the past 5 years, though only my case had enough evidence for prosecution. But the real victory wasn't sending them to prison. It was what I decided to do with my second chance at life. 3 years later, I'm sitting in the office of the Harrison Protection Foundation, watching Jake Morrison, Marcus's grandson, and now my business partner, coordinate another rescue operation. The foundation operates out of a building I purchased specifically for this work, complete with hotlines, legal resources, and a network of investigators who help families facing situations like mine. This month alone, we've helped an 80-year-old man whose nephew was slowly draining his accounts through forged checks, a widow whose own daughter was preparing to have her declared incompetent so she could sell the family home, and a retired teacher whose loving son-in-law was manipulating her medications. Each case reminds me that what happened to me wasn't personal, it was purely opportunistic. Predators look for vulnerable people with assets, and they don't care if their victims are strangers or family members. The Harrison Protection Foundation has helped 93 families recover stolen assets and prosecute abusive relatives. We've trained law enforcement officers in 12 states, educated medical professionals about the signs of elder abuse, and changed laws to better protect vulnerable seniors. Every case we win is a victory against the predators who think elderly people are easy targets just because we move a little slower and sometimes need reading glasses to see the fine print. I never remarried, never adopted Jake as a replacement son, never got the Hollywood ending that stories usually promise. But at 65, I've built something more valuable than a fairy tale, a purpose that transforms my worst experience into meaningful protection for others. The foundation operates with the efficiency of a well-run business and the passion of people who've seen firsthand how devastating elder abuse can be. We have hotlines that ring 24 hours a day, legal resources for families who can't afford attorneys, and a network of investigators who work for justice rather than just money. Last month, Dr. Sarah Chen, the geriatrician who helped me recover from the medication-induced cognitive impairment, joined our medical advisory board. She's developing protocols to help doctors recognize when patients are being manipulated or drugged by family members. I received a letter from David last year, written on prison stationery that looked as cheap as his apologies. He'd found religion behind bars, apparently, and wanted forgiveness and financial help for his appeals. The letter was filled with biblical quotes and promises to change. I read it once, then filed it away without response. Some bridges are burned for good reason. David had his chance to be a real son, and he chose greed instead. Those choices have consequences he'll live with for the rest of his life. Instead, I focus my energy on the family I've chosen. People like Jake and Dr. Chen and Marcus, who prove that real family isn't about blood relations, but about people who genuinely care about your well-being. The woman they tried to erase became stronger than they ever imagined possible. And honestly, that's the sweetest revenge of all. The moral of the story? Never underestimate a woman who's built an empire once. She's perfectly capable of building another one, this time to protect people from predators like her own son. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.